first started organizationally, like what we recommend to the enterprise overall and to project teams is this pentagon of steps. So the first thing we encourage teams to do, and again, kind of remember we're coming from a point where teams were not doing this, like we're starting with blank slate. So we encourage teams to just give it a try. Give any part of test automation shifting left a try and see how it goes. Have an open mind, adopt a different mindset about it, and try it out. When you're giving test automation a try, when you're shifting left, follow collaboration. So, don't try to do this in isolation. Use your project team, use other teams in your area who've done this to learn. So collaborate together. When you're collaborating, define your strategy. So use your collective knowledge. So developer, you're thinking about the way the code works and like very specific things that's happening in the code. Testers are thinking about all these like edge scenarios and thinking about what can go right and wrong and all of this like thinking. And then the business is thinking about like the perspective of client experience. So I'm actually rolling this out to people who are going to be using the software, and I'm rolling it out to associates who are going to be serving clients with the software. There's all these different perspectives, which if you have just one person who's writing the requirements or the feature files, you miss. So we definitely recommend a lot of collaboration. Through the collaboration and defining the test strategy together, you're also using that time to say, where is the lowest level that I can actually add this test? So can I write it in a unit test? Do I need integration tests here, or does this belong in end-to-end? Do we even want to automate it? You're using that time to really define those things as a team. Eventually, you get to this point where you're starting to transform your team practices because you have developers who are sitting in and seeing how to facilitate given window sessions. The tester perhaps is pair programming with the developer and is starting to see how some of the code works. They feel more comfortable writing some scripts. So you see a lot of role sharing, a lot of responsibility sharing, and eventually you get to a point where you've redefined your team roles. So along each of these points, we suggest different best practices and we provide resources to help teams along with that. So within the process space, what did we learn? The first thing is that really any kind of team can benefit from just doing better collaboration instead of jumping straight into automation. So because we do have like very varied system architectures and different project teams, we have teams who are custom development. We have teams who are supporting third-party projects, vendors. We have teams who have mainframe or like very data-heavy projects. And everyone has like slightly different test automation need and different architecture, different tool set, different practice that they can apply. So we have to work through that. But no matter what, we think that teams can benefit from collaborating better. That's the first starting point. As I alluded to this earlier, we are rolling out BDD at big scale, so we are learning about that right now. I think there is a lot there, and some of the things that we've run into rolling out BDD at large scale is we have this case of bimodal IT, so we have repositories for legacy test cases and requirements, and as we're moving to feature files, teams are thinking about, like, how do I rewrite these things? Do I do it in a big bang? Do I rewrite my legacy test cases and requirements to feature files as I'm touching them? So there's these kind of challenges when you're adopting feature files over legacy test cases and requirements. And the biggest lesson learned is, testing and requirements practice, this process really changes. So for us, as part of this transformation, we also introduced 2 new project roles because we knew testing and BA work is changing. We wanted to give testers opportunity to develop their skill sets if they wanted to learn how to code and write test automation scripts. We recognize that test automation is pretty much like application code. You have to maintain it the same way. So we wanted to give a training path for testers to upskill. And we also created a hybrid role. We call it product test engineer. So the first role was automation engineer. The second one is product test engineer. And this role is for anyone who's really interested in it, but it's like hybrid between BA, where you're doing a lot of the facilitation, leading of requirement sessions of collaboration given when then. There's also a testing twist to it, where you're thinking about the product overall, and helping to drive what the scenario should be, thinking about the test data strategy for the team, doing exploratory testing. So we created different roles to help teams, because we did see that testing requirements were impacted. So within technology and tool space, what our mission in life is to really eliminate any kind of friction within testing and tools. We focus on addressing project teams that we have the most of, so because we do have so many different architectures. For example, we first focused on Java, custom dev, and that's what we addressed. And as we moved through that list and we created reference architecture for the type of test automation tool they should be using, the types of process that they should be using, we started addressing other architectures. The next thing I would recommend, like if you're looking at enterprise-wide level of tools that you want to add, think about your overall build pipeline and make sure that whatever tools you're looking at will function well in that space. So you don't want to pick a tool that won't work in your build pipeline. And sometimes what happens is teams jump to a tool because they hear it like, ooh, shiny new tool, like sounds good. It sounds like it'll work for me, but they don't think about, will it actually work with all the project teams that I have and types of requirements and the build process we're using. So as I mentioned, begin with your outcomes, not just diving into the tools. When we bring in new tools, we work with project teams on the floor. So after we've done this like initial analysis, we invite project teams to do proof of concept. And we do that deliberately because we think including teams gives us real feedback. We're not really on the ground anymore delivering applications, so we don't have that perspective. We have a very different perspective. But it's also a way to get community buy-in with certain tools that are being rolled out. So if one project team is really experiencing success with it, they're more likely to talk about it and tell others, and this news kind of organically spreads. From metrics perspective, we've tried different things with metrics. So I can tell you with test pyramid, so the previous slide, when we first started doing shift left test transformation, we needed some kind of structure for the organization because we kept getting questioned like, what should my test automation look like? Like, give me some boundaries of what it should be. And we had suggested 70-20-10. So having the test pyramid where you have foundation of unit tests and then less integration tests and then the least amount of your big, large end-to-end tests. Well, people were taking this like very literally. They were trying to be as ideal as possible with 70-20-10, 70% of their tests in unit and so forth. So we had to move away from this concept as we gained more maturity because teams were actually creating like anti-behavior with it, where they were thinking about the task again. Like, I need to create this many tests, but I'm not thinking about what I'm actually getting from creating the tests. I'm not thinking about the actual outcome. In some cases, what we also learned with tools and technology is some coaching requests came in, and teams would come and say, "Hey, help me figure out how to add like test automation to this. I'm struggling with it." And when we dug deeper, we found that actually the way their code was designed was so poor that that's why it was so hard for them to write test automation. So we've actually kind of gone full circle where we tried to influence teams with how they're actually writing their code as well and how they're designing it, because it could lead to poor testability. And then another lesson learned for us for tools and technology is around maintenance. So when we do bring in these tools and frameworks, they do need to be maintained just like any other kind of software. So we do spend time maintaining, bringing in new tools, updating our existing libraries. So what can you actually do? We get this question a lot. So, depending on the role you're in, like, what can I do to help my team move forward with this? So if you're a leader, the best thing that you can do is support the team and help them make sure you're understanding the right shift left behaviors, that you're not just perpetuating like bad behaviors, and you actually understand what the right things are. So recognize, reward right behavior, understand what the team is measuring, and make sure that they're measuring things that are productive. Scrum Masters and project managers. So you kind of like heard a lot of these themes throughout, but you have to plan for test automation. Like it's not like a free activity that comes really easily or anything like that. You have to plan for it in your estimates. Retrospectives are a great place to bring up how you're doing shift left and to bring these like issues to light and see how the team is pursuing test automation, what benefits are they getting. And you can encourage practices like having code dojos where you have a small group of team members from your team or even from your department come together and try to solve a specific problem hands-on. And then of course pair programming. But most importantly, if there are teams in your area that are doing this well, or maybe you're particularly doing something well, to share it. So if you're a VA, something that we recommend is look into collaboration and like good collaboration practices, how to facilitate give and win events, example mapping, understand what the team is trying to do with test automation, help facilitate this on the team. Testers and test engineers. So depending on your starting point, if you're a tester who codes or if you're a tester who doesn't code, pair with developers to help get the test at the lowest level and encourage that. Exploratory testing, so use it wisely. Don't just haphazardly do it, but encourage team to do exploratory testing. In our experience, we found that having a data strategy is very important. It's something that teams tend to struggle with. So I think having a planned data strategy is something that testers can also help the team with. And then tech leads and developers. So depending on where you're starting in your organization, like for us, we were starting with testers who did not have coding skills. So, and our development culture was such that developers don't write unit tests. They don't write too many of them, and when they do, they're not such good quality. We think that there's a lot of impact to developers where you have to adopt a quality mindset and realize that you help contribute to the quality of your product. It's not just any one team member, but it's everyone on the team. Depending on where you are as a developer in your journey, you have to expand your skill set too and learn test automation frameworks. It's something new. So if you are up for it, you can try to apply TDD. But with that, it's practice makes perfect. So we have some teams who are very passionate about TDD and they apply it, some who struggle with it. So if you can, I think the biggest anti-behavior we see is even if teams have invested in their test automation, they don't fix the problems that the test automation shows them, so they ignore it or they comment out the failed test. So that's probably the worst behavior of all. Like, if you're going to invest in creating the test automation and you don't leverage when it's telling you something to learn from it, you're not getting any kind of outcome from it, so you probably just shouldn't do it. And then testable code starts with good design, good code design. So from metrics perspective, there's a few that when we have our own internal dashboard, the things that we look at are these types of metrics. So we use SonarQube, and we created a custom widget within SonarQube, which project teams can set up and configure for their projects. So we have lagging indicators, which is kind of like afterwards, but we look at how many defects a project team has after going into production, how long it takes them to run their regression cycles. Leading indicators, which tell them feedback up front, is percentage of automated tests. So it's kind of like, what does your test pyramid look like, and are you actually adding test automation? Are you increasing it? What does your test pyramid look like? And your test health. So what does your line coverage look like? Your branch coverage look like? Differential and mutation testing. And then one became very clear to us as teams adopted test automation is they would start telling stories like, we run our tests and we feel so much more comfortable having a test harness in place that will tell us if something is wrong. We're really happy about it because it gives us a way to tell if we've introduced an issue or not. So they start telling stories like this, like they're telling this story because of the automation that they've done and the benefit that they're seeing from it. So we think there's qualitative measure there too. That's what really sold us on outcome thinking instead of it being like tasks. I have to add these tests. I need to add Selenium. I need to add more integration tests. Like, why do you need to add these things? Like, what is the outcome that you want to achieve from doing it? Do you want to feel more comfortable making changes? Do you want to know that you've run through your code and you have good coverage? Like, what outcome are you trying to get to? Because if you're just adding test automation and then you're going to comment it out or not respond to it, it fails, like it's not probably good use of your time. So qualitatively, if the team feels like really comfortable making changes and they've even built the trust with their business. So we have stories like that too, where the product owners are saying, oh yeah, like my team has good mutation testing, like this is what our test pyramid looks like, and the product owners are like jazzed, like they understand what the team is doing. They have trusted the team to invest in learning these new skills. And they see the benefit. So that's another qualitative indicator that the team is doing something really well. And from shift left adoption, so we started the journey in 2015 and started capturing metrics. And so shift left, the way that we're defining it is team has been trained and they've started applying test automation. So we have the line showing the number of teams that we have, and then the bar shows how many teams have adopted shift left. So we've seen steady increase of teams adopting and applying shift left in our organization. Some like qualitative feedback that we heard from, so clients to us are IT project teams. They're not clients who are actually logging onto Vanguard.com. So one feedback that we heard is automated testing that results from ATD or PDD methodology has allowed the team to reduce testing time significantly so they can deliver very rapidly. By following principles of shift left, we're able to extract out smaller services, allow more testability and independent releases from the monolith. Shifting left is a great way to improve our communication with everyone involved in the project. So that's pretty much it for the presentation that I wanted to share, but I did have an ask for the group at large here. We think that like AI and robotics, there's a little bit of a trend happening, so I just wanted to put it out there that if anyone is applying any of these technologies within testing space or development space, if you wouldn't mind sharing your experience. That's it. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for staying. I'm here for any questions, if anyone has anything.
What kind of cultural challenges your organization goes through while setting up this transformation program, and how do you overcome that?
What kind of cultural challenges? So I think culturally we are pretty conservative, and we've been used to very like top-down driven process maybe. So I think a big cultural change for us is thinking about like outcomes, I'd say. Like we see outcome theme happen in shift left, but I think overall project teams need to realize that they have to adapt all of these processes that are happening to them. We get a lot of questions like, how do I actually do this? Like, I've been copying and pasting your sample Selenium code, and like, well, it's a sample. Like, you have to adapt it to what you're actually doing. you can't just use the template. So we see a lot of that where, depending on the culture you're starting with, it was very top down. It was, if something was already always given to project teams, they kind of expect it. And you have to help the teams evolve and start thinking about what is it that they're trying to achieve, and adapting all this information and process to their business, their architecture, to the solution they're trying to deliver.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest question that we get is like, what tool should I use? And we're like, well, you're coming to me out of the blue asking me what tool should you use? Like, we need context. Like, there's no one tool fits all solution. I think a lot of teams want and expect to be kind of like hand-fed or spoon-fed answers to certain problems. And like testing is a very critical thinking challenge. Software development too, like very critical thinking type of a mindset. So everything is like, it depends.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Helping teams think through the solutions that work for them.
You're mentioning, of course, people need to upskill, learn how to program or develop. Do you have cases where people would like to, from a manual testing perspective, but they try it for a little bit and then it's not for me, or resistance? You mentioned top down.
Yeah, we have all of those things. All of those, yeah. So we worked with HR deliberately to create like process for project teams who are impacted, who maybe no longer want to do manual testing. Like, that need for that skill set's not really there, and they want to pursue test automation because the project team has gone through training. They have people in the team who want to do this, like the team's bought into it, they want to do this. So the process is that individuals have a choice of different roles which they can pursue, which are specifically carved out just for them. They're all over the board. They can be development jobs, they could be project management jobs, they could be manual testing jobs in different project teams which still have demand for this type of skill set. So they were provided avenue. I don't have the statistics with me, but the first wave of this that we did, a lot of individuals pursued staying on the same project team and pursued increasing their skill sets. So we started this, I guess it must have been like end of last year, so we're about a year in, so we're just starting to see results from that, but we see that. It's a journey. I mean, I don't think it's like very easy thing to do because people go to school for 4 years to earn a computer science degree, and we're asking people to learn this on the job. So it's a challenge. Like, we suggest that if a manual tester is trying to pursue this, that they start with end-to-end testing, but they watch out for this behavior of throwing, instead of having manual tests thrown over the wall for them to test, having end-to-end test cases and automating those thrown over the wall. So it's still just as important for the team to figure out what's the lowest level possible to write these tests, so that the tester doesn't end up proliferating all of these end-to-end tests.
Well, what do you do when there are computer science background and manual testers? That's my challenge right now with my team. I have people in between that are somewhat okay. There are people specialized that are great. And there are people who offer the opportunity, but there's an extra effort because there's never, the company can do so much in time allotted to train, right? So there's always business, trying to mitigate that. But then they see that it's not what they want to do, or they can't keep up, whatever the reason is. But they're still unhappy because they want to be out there and they're in the team.
They need to change job. You
change job, yeah.
You can't solve that problem.
I know. It's one
At
way.
will employment.
The numbers, for me, it's a 200 and something size company. We're talking about a lot of people in your company, so you have opportunities to actually offer it while I'm locked into what I can really offer.
It's true.
The flexibility.
It's true.
I need them to be realistic. Yeah, all right, thank you.
How many weeks they need a team as soon as they need some support from like a coach?
For the coaching engagements, it varies on